Welcome to What's Working. I'm Kyle Kittleson. This is Callie the Lab. She's perfect. I'm still working on it. This episode is all about narcissism.
Your brain, your body, your mind, your soul. The What's Working Show with Callie and Kyle.
Dr. Ramani, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Kyle. It's
Now,
so good to see you.
Most of our viewers know you from the mini med circle videos you've done, specifically about personality disorders, and even more specifically about narcissism.
Yes.
What is narcissism?
So narcissism is a pattern which is characterized by a lack of empathy, someone who's really entitled, someone who's really grandiose, validation seeking, look at me, tell me I'm great, very arrogant, very, very vain. They often are quite vain. They can be prone to rage if they get frustrated or disappointed. They can also be very controlling. It has to be their way or the highway. But at the core of it, they're deeply, deeply insecure. And that's the piece that people don't get. They just think that narcissists are full of themselves. And that's why a lot of narcissists get missed, because sometimes they're angry and sullen and resentful. So their entitlement comes out as, why should I have to work? I'm better than having to go clock into a job. And that feels kind of grumpy and icky, but that's actually also, we can see narcissism that looks like that. But the core of it is insecurity.
Yeah. Before you got to the insecurity and the rage, I felt like you were describing Callie.
Well, you know, it's funny. Like it could feel like I was describing a little kid. Do you know what I'm saying? Like
Yes.
think of a little child. A child doesn't often always stop to think about, and I want to eat right now, mommy, I want to eat. They don't stop to think, has mommy eaten? Part of healthy development is a child learns that sometimes they need to put they have to put their needs maybe second, or they have to wait, or they have to ensure the other people around them are okay. That's healthy development. And I think dogs are typically around the age of a 2-year-old, right? 2 or 3-year-old. And in fact, you know what? There are even some dogs that aren't very narcissistic and are incredibly self-sacrificial and care deeply about they take care deeply about the people that they live with and are very attentive and patient. So I'd even say that dogs have a narcissism spectrum too. I've seen some very selfish dogs.
Yes, yeah, I agree with that. Well, for our viewers watching this, leave a comment in this video explaining or describing a time where you interacted with a narcissist, whether this was in a romantic relationship or just somebody you met at a bar or something. You thought, you know what, that seems a little narcissistic to me. And now I really want to get into how we can avoid getting into a relationship in the first place, because so many people are coming to you after the fact.
Yeah,
I've been married to a narcissist for 10 years. What do I do? How do we prevent getting married to a narcissist in the first place?
I mean, Kyle, that is my life's mission
Yes.
at this point. If we could do that, I cannot tell you how much anguish we'd lift, how many wasted lives we'd lift, how many really hurt children. I mean, it is the answer to so much in our culture. It's flabbergasting. I mean, so this is something that is my passion project, and yet, people will say, you're gonna take my fairy tale out of my cold dead hands. Like, don't you touch my Prince Charming. I get a lot of that, like he's coming. And he's going to rescue me, and he's going to have lots of money, and he's going to be really nice, and he's going to buy me lots of things, and he's going to love me forever. And I'm like, yeah, that's probably not how it's going to go down. You might want something more collaborative and shoot for kindness. And so it's a lot of people, you know, where I see the blind spots are wanting the fairy tale, believing in the Prince Charming myth. And frankly, a big, big blind spot for so many people is timing. And I think that's where narcissists often do a lot of their devil's handiwork in relationships. I am actually shocked, Kyle, at how many men feel pressure to get married. Somewhere between 35 and 41, men may want to become fathers. They may feel that it's their responsibility to do right by their parents. They need to get married, and they have to have kids, and they have to have the house and the picket fence. And they themselves are ambivalent about it. Women obviously feel that pressure. Clearly part of it's biological, but the fact is everyone around you is getting married. You're on 10 weddings in a year. You don't feel like you're fitting in. Everyone's tugging at you like, when's the big day? It's a pressure. It's a real pressure. And many of the people I've worked with who got into relationships with narcissists said, I knew all of this was coming, but it was time, and I didn't feel like starting from scratch. That's what did them in. That's really what did them in. And I'm like, girl, you would have been better alone.
All right, well, we're going to come back here and learn the warning flags, the red flags that you can look out for when dating so you can avoid a 10-year or 15-year or 20-year or 30-year relationship with a narcissist, and take a look at this MedCircle series all about narcissism with Dr. Romney.
Children who don't get consistent emotional mirroring from their parents, that's a setup for becoming a narcissist later on. Because that's how children learn to regulate their emotional worlds. They learn how to self-soothe their emotions. They learn how to take responsibility for their emotions. They learn how to understand their emotions from how they're mirrored by their parents. And if their parents have consistent, appropriate reactions and are available to them, that's how the child learns that. So if a child, for any number of reasons, doesn't have that kind of consistent feedback from their parents, the parents are distracted, the parents are absent, the parents don't care, the parents are addicted to drugs and are not available in that way, all of those could be contributors to that. Parents just are abusive in some way. Obviously, that can be a contributor too to inconsistent kinds of mirroring. We also think about narcissism in the early environment as a function of attachment. Children who have secure, healthy attachments tend to go on to adulthood and make more secure, healthy attachments. But kids who have more anxious or avoidant attachments, that can set the tone for attachment issues in adulthood, and they're not able to make those kinds of successful attachments in adulthood. So their relationships are really fraught with lots of in and out, back and forth, rather than the consistency you'd see from a secure attachment with a parent.
You can watch that entire series and more at medcircle.com. All right, now, Dr. Romney, how would it look with a narcissist picking somebody up at a bar?
You know, it would actually be likely very enticing, very seductive, very smooth, very exciting, very glib. I mean, it's going to be the sort of, I'm going to use a heterosexual paradigm for this one, okay? Man picking up woman, because normatively that's what's going to happen.
Right.
First of all, we know narcissists are very vain as a rule. Like, they take good care of their appearance, and some, especially if they're in a pickup joint. You know, they're going to be whatever looking good. Maybe they work out and they're sort of showing off their arms and they're this and they're that. You know, they may be really well dressed if it's a more high-end place, but they're probably going to look pretty good. Okay, well groomed and all of that. They're going to make eye contact, but they're going to be arrogant, more likely. You know, but not like in a icky way. But they may send you a drink. They may, you know, kind of connect with you. They may crack jokes, be louder than other people, be drawing attention to themselves. And then they'll sidle over. And you might even think like, oh, I'm not even going to engage this person. You might get caught in the playfulness and try to play a little hard to get, which is narcissism bait if you play hard to get. Playing hard to get. That's why I always think playing hard to get is a dangerous technique, because it's like a sieve. You're more likely to pull out the narcissists that way. Because other people might feel, oh, this isn't worth the bother. They like the gamesmanship. And initially, it really can be very seductive. They can be incredibly good at conversation, very comfortable with conversation, ask you a lot about yourself, and really share a phenomenally interesting story about themselves, where they've traveled, where they live, where they went to school, and they'll be masterful at sticking in. Like, you'll be talking about something, I'll say, oh yeah, I remember this really great pizza place when I was at Harvard. Oh my God, it was so good. Like, it's interesting how you got pepperoni and Harvard in the same sentence, you know? And so it'll be that, or, you know, gosh, at my parents' house in Hawaii, like, they'll get their little things in there. And it doesn't just mean somebody who's got money. It can be even somebody who doesn't have a lot, but still manages to sort of tell you the grandiose yarn. And listen, at a bar, people are loosened up.
Right.
You've likely been drinking, so your guard isn't up the same way. And it's not many people out there who've been acculturated to go for or be interested in the sort of rumpled, quiet guy in the corner who has trouble approaching you.
But who? I don't want to go for that person.
I do.
You do.
Okay.
You want the rumpled guy in the corner who's too nervous to approach you.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Why? Because you think he's not a narcissist?
Because I think he might be kind.
Because you think he might be kind.
I think he might be kind, and maybe and I'm an introvert, so I think he may be an introvert, so he's not going to extrovert pressure me. And so, but I mean it, like, that's who I might pay attention to. I mean, all things being equal, like, I don't want him to be like
Of course.
ungroomed,
Of
but
course, yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Like there's a smoothness, a slickness, a fairy taleness that can happen. And it can, I mean, in a bar, it's going to be, again, obvious, the drinking, the setting, the lighting. That's what they're there for. Picking up people in a bar is their ground game. They're so good at it. They're better at it than the rest of us. In fact, there's research that shows that the narcissist more often succeeds in getting the girl. There's no two ways about it. But that whole sort of knowing exactly how to look at you, how to make a woman feel beautiful. Like, do you have any idea that you are the best looking woman in this place?
But how?
It's so, I mean, gives you the shivers.
But for some people, it gives them the shivers because they're excited.
No, it gives me the shivers because I'm terrified. But normal people, it gives them the shivers because they're excited.
Right.
Everybody wants to be seen. I think what narcissists in that first blush, in that first flirtation, are so good at is giving people the two things we most desperately want: to be seen and to be heard.
Yes.
And they're good at it, not because they're good at seeing and hearing, but because they're very good at figuring it out. That's why they're great salesmen or saleswomen or salespeople.
Right.
So it's really that. They're smooth. They often can do the things you're supposed to do in a bar well. They can dance. Whereas a person maybe who's more introverted and more self-effacing might not be willing to put themselves out there. And when a narcissist is just drinking, as long as they're not full-on drunk, they're actually even more smooth, because any tiny bit of anxiety or insecurity that they do have, that actually starts to fade. So they are just, it's almost too good to be true.
I think that's it. If it looks too good to be true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might be.
He might say, like, I can't, I'd love to get your number. And then they'll say, I have a busy weekend. I'm taking my helicopter out to Catalina. And you're like, that's so cool.
Yeah.
You didn't need to drop the helicopter bomb in the first encounter.
So you're not saying we can't date somebody who does take their helicopter to Catalina on the weekend?
No, I'm not saying that.
We're
no.
just
so
saying.
all those helicopter flying people to Catalina, this is not meant to be.
Yeah. We don't need your mean comments.
We're not
but
targeting
we
you.
just don't need the helicopter person to tell us in the first meeting that that's what they're doing.
It's the too good to be trueness of it all.
Yeah.
It's, it really, and I think that is an almost impossible thing to socialize people on. I even think that people are getting more sophisticated. Like, if it feels too good to be true, if it feels too movie-like, that maybe people might even have their cynical ears up a little bit. But this is not a one-off. This is not a one-time indoctrination process. It will unfold if you stay in contact with this person over the next 4 weeks to 2 months. That's what that initial period is. And then that is an indoctrination. You get drawn into something, and even when you're super cynical, I'm like, I'm not gonna fall for this really attractive, Harvard-educated, helicopter-flying, business-owning smoothie. I'm better than that. Because when all of that's happening, you're sorting through helicopters and fast cars and cool jobs and amazing travel and the fact that he's climbed 1,000 mountains or whatever it is he's done, you stop looking as acutely to the things like empathy and reciprocity and mutuality. Because you know what? Sometimes their stories are so good, you don't even notice they're not asking about yours.
Ooh, yes. I get that. Now, go back to this timeline, 4 weeks to 2 months.
Yeah.
So around the 2-month period or before, it starts to unravel with their true colors, how they really are, how this relationship will really look.
Yeah, I call it the solar eclipse.
The solar eclipse.
The sun goes behind the moon for a while, and the world becomes very cold, and you were used to the sun shining. And so, listen, in every relationship, Kyle, somewhere between 2 and 6 months, it starts becoming more regular life. You're eating at home. It's not as fanciful. There's workplace stress that you actually talk about. People pass gas. The gas passing moment in a relationship is a significant one.
Yes.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, you wake up in the morning without your makeup on. Like, it starts becoming real life. That's different because in a healthy relationship, even when that normal stuff starts kicking in, you still feel connected. It still feels good and nice and actually comforting. In a narcissistic relationship, after that first 4 to 8 weeks, 1 to 2 months passes, it almost feels like a relatively abrupt change, like they become bored. That they might even be a little bit contemptuous of you, that they're not nearly as interested. They may, though, also start to become more controlling. Some people, especially young women, misinterpret control for affection, love, or interest. He wants to be with me all the time. He texts me 20 times a day. He must be into me. That's not healthy. And that's, again, that's a really
Wait, did you
tough
hear
area.
that, ladies?
Yeah.
Did you hear it? That's not healthy.
For
You
men,
are worth
too.
more than that.
But
Yes,
Kyle, for men,
everybody.
too.
But 80, what was it? 80%
80-20.
of
Yeah, it's probably
80%
80-20. Yeah.
of narcissists are
men.
male.
So that idea that he loves me, he wants to go everywhere with me, he wants to drop me off at work, he's waiting for me to pick me up at the end of the day. You know, he's in the airport, he calls me the whole time, he texts me during the whole flight, he catches me during my lunch break. Not romantic. It's intrusive, it's controlling, and it's concerning. And I have no doubt that some people are watching this and saying, she's being terribly unromantic. I have worked with so many clients who've been in these narcissistic, controlling, sometimes abusive relationships, and they almost always had that controlling feature. So after about 2 months, when that control is happening early in a relationship, Kyle, it's often accompanied with a, you're so beautiful, I think you're great, 100 bunches of flowers showing up at the workplace and gifts and come meet my mom and let's fly to some other city for dinner or have this massive picnic. It feels too good to be true. The control may be happening simultaneously, but the too good to be true part, you're not paying attention.
Right.
You think they always want to be with you. Then it sort of starts to shift. They're not as interested. They may even start discarding you a little, but they intend to keep you around. But the control remains.
Yes.
Where are you going? Who are you with? Who are you
Yes.
seeing? What's this about? Why didn't you tell me about this? Why weren't you home at time? Exactly where were you? Who are you seeing?
Yes.
And it starts to escalate.
Yes.
Or there's a disinterest. Or there's a dismissiveness. Or why are we talking about your work problems? Do I look interested? And they seemed so interested a month ago.
Yeah.
So it can be incredibly destabilizing. Kyle, I've worked with people who've been in 25 to 30-year relationships with narcissists. They go back to the first 2 months. They say, but we went to San Francisco for dinner. I'm like, that was 25 years ago.
And that was one night.
It was one night. But they keep going back to it. I want that guy back. And I'm like, yeah, that guy was never here.
That guy was never here. Yes, exactly. Very good. Okay, if you are getting this, if lights are going off, if bells are going off and you're going, yes, 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 I get this, give this video a thumbs up. And when we come back, we're going to learn what Dr. Ramani's deal breakers are in a relationship. I mean, these are her deal breakers. It'll be a fun game that we play right after this. Right now, enjoy this series with Dr. Ramani. Are there co-occurring disorders that are commonly seen with BPD?
So co-occurring or comorbid disorders with borderline personality are endemic. That's what makes the treatment here so complicated. The co-occurring patterns or disorders we most often and most likely see with borderline personality are depression, anxiety, eating disorders, substance use disorders, bipolar disorders, not unusual. Those are not uncommon, okay? We also see a subtype of borderline personality where there is not an insubstantial group that have very high levels of narcissism alongside the borderline personality style. So people get a little confused. They'll say there are these moments where there's no empathy and there's a lot of entitlement and grandiosity, but then there are these moments of this really cavernous distress, which is what you'd never see in narcissistic. And there's, again, a burgeoning literature on what happens when you see these two patterns coexisting.
To see more of Dr. Ramani, make sure you go to medcircle.com or just visit the links below this video. Now it is time to play a new game here on What's Working. Called Deal Breaker. Ooh. We're gonna put a statement of fact on the teleprompter or on the screen here, and then you're gonna say if that would be a deal breaker for you when you're dating somebody.
You know me. I think I'm gonna. People are gonna,
yes, deal breaker.
She deserves to die alone because everything's a deal breaker.
No. Okay, so number one, they're rude to waiter at restaurants.
So deal breaker.
Such a deal breaker, right?
Yes, it's indicative of entitlement, lack of empathy, dismissiveness. If they're doing it to the waiter, tomorrow they're doing it to you.
There
Out.
you go.
Bye.
So if you're on a date with somebody and they are rude to the staff, is that a sign that they could be a narcissist?
I mean, it's a soft sign. Listen, just because someone's rude to a waiter, I'm not going to slap that label onto them, but I'm willing to take the bet. So, you know, again, it is indicative of things like entitlement, of lack of empathy, of that you're better than them. It's arrogance, it's dismissiveness. And if they're doing it to the waiter, it's just a matter of time. before they do it to you.
Yes. All right. Next one. They bring up their ex on the first date in a negative way, more than once.
I'm going to say it's a 3/4 deal breaker, okay? And I'm going to tell you why I'm giving them that 25% wiggle room. I think it's inappropriate because, number one, if they're talking about that like that about the ex, they're going to do it to you if you become the ex, right? So it's sort of a harbinger of things to come. It speaks to a lack of emotional regulation, that they can't talk about something in an appropriate way, which would concern me about down the line, that they'll have no problem lobbing inappropriate things and not sort of filtering. And not filtering is a key sign of narcissism. All of that said, people who have been deeply hurt sometimes by someone and are just fresh out in the dating world, it's nothing but raw scar tissue. And sometimes, especially if it was like a 10-year relationship, that's all the template they've got. And it can be almost like a nervous tick kind of a thing.
Yeah.
They almost can't help themselves. This one, however, if it happens again on the second date, I would say then probably not, because there's something obsessive and ruminative that's happening, which is, again, in narcissistic people, if they've had an ego injury, they often can't let go of things. That's not your problem. If they can't let go of it, you don't need that burden in your life. So I'm going with, kind of 75% deal breaker on that.
I would say for me, it wouldn't bother me if they did it a little bit, because fine. But if they're going, oh, my ex was, and there was a lot of passion behind it, I'd go, easy. Like, they're your ex. Let's move on from that.
Or even like to say, the person will bring something up. Because you talk about histories on a first date, and a person's like, oh, let's just leave it like this. My ex was a narcissist. I don't want to get into it.
Yes.
And then there's a sort of a tone of like, let's just put that down. Or, you know what, it's relevant to the conversation. That's why I'm giving them that 25% wiggle room. But if it seems to be the chronic theme of the messaging of a new relationship, I think you want to watch that, because you don't need to still be living in their breakup. It's not yours.
Yes. All right, let's go to number 3. A couple weeks into the relationship, they act like hanging out with your family is a chore, and that when they hang out with your family, it's such a gift that they're doing that.
So here's an interesting one. This is deal breaker-ish. Again, we're back to the 75-25, and here's why. Okay? Now you're bringing other people into this story, which is your family. Is your family nice? Like that, there's an assumption here that your family is great. And so if for any reason you may have something good with your family, but your family is stepping on toes with this new person, and that's a realistic assessment, like maybe this isn't pleasant for them, then they may have reason to say that this isn't comfortable for me. This idea, though, that I'm white knuckling this experience, it sort of sets up this you owe me kind of a dynamic. I'm going to endure my 6 hours here, but there's going to be a 6-hour payback down the road. That ends up setting a really bad, almost what I call keeping accounts in a relationship. When you start doing that, I mean, listen, relationships are about compromise. A couple of weeks in is also pretty early. Depending on how close you are to your family, sometimes families are how people meet each other. So they've met each other right in the beginning, right? But this is early on. So if all this soon into a relationship, spending time with one person's family, especially if that family is important to them, is already being written in such a negative way, I'm not seeing many legs on this relationship. There's some people who don't like their family, so they don't care if their partner is into them or not. So again, I'm giving a 75% on this because there's a presumption that the family is nice. Because if your family is jerks, you may like your family and acknowledge their jerkiness, but bringing someone new into that mix, not so much.
So let's assume the family is really great.
Okay.
Is that a narcissistic red flag?
The reason is if the family was great, and let's even say a couple of months into the relationship this is happening, the fact that they're almost like being like acting with this martyr or victim-y complex, like, oh, I'm suffering through this, look at what a great partner I am. Believe it or not, narcissists are prone to viewing themselves in this martyry victim way. People think of narcissists as grandiose and all that. They can be very, very victimhood associated. Oh, all the burdens of the world are mine. Why am I suffering more than anyone else? That dynamic can be quite concerning. Yeah.
All right. That's a deal breaker for me because my family's great. So if you're going to date me, we're going to see them and you're going to love it. Was that narcissistic?
A little bit. Sorry, sweetie.
Because that's how I feel. Okay, let's go to our next one. On your first date, they order chicken fingers and French fries.
Not a deal breaker. That's judgy. Like, no, not a deal breaker. I mean,
I have a
unless you're
caveat
like-
to my answer. What's
okay,
your answer?
unless you're like Gordon Ramsay, like this shouldn't be that big a problem. Here's the thing.
Yeah.
If they've taken you to a really fancy high-end restaurant known for a certain cuisine, and they ask for the children's menu, I still don't know if it's a deal breaker. Because it may speak to an immaturity in their palate, a lack of sophistication in their palate. I don't know, maybe even just sort of just an ordinariness to them, like like a regular guy kind of thing. It feels a little snobby to throw them under the bus. If they're sweet and kind and are asking about you and listening to your answers and are really respectful to the other people around them,
But want more ranch dressing?
and they want chicken fingers, sign me up.
If they acknowledge the fact that they're ordering chicken fingers and how that's different for a 40-year-old man, then I'm going, okay, you get that this is obscure. But if I'm like, cool, I'm gonna have the prime rib, medium rare, a side of like mashed potatoes, and they go, I'll just have chicken fingers with extra ketchup, please. I'm gonna go, what did you just order?
Okay, so we're talking about narcissism.
Yes.
There's nothing narcissistic
No,
about
I
chicken
agree
fingers.
with that, yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything toxic about chicken fingers.
I agree with
now,
that.
if you order the prime rib and they order the chicken fingers and say, they make fun of your order, they say, that's too much money you're spending, thinking like, why'd you bring me to this place then?
Right.
But again, it feels snobbish. In fact, I would be concerned someone narcissistic would reject someone on the basis of chicken fingers.
I think I would if they didn't acknowledge it. Or if I was like, chicken fingers, and they're like, look, I loved him when I'm 6, I love him now, then I'd go, great, you acknowledge that this is a 6-year-old meal.
So you want them to be aware of sort of that it's there's something almost age inappropriate.
Yes, because what if I take this person to a business meeting and they order chicken fingers? I'm gonna be embarrassed by
Okay,
that.
I'm gonna push this one a little bit. Okay, all over California are these little electric scooters. Okay, to me a scooter is a child's form of transportation. Okay, they kick their feet and they go down the street, maybe go to a lemonade stand. There are grown men, 40 years old, powering down Wilshire Boulevard on a scooter.
Yeah.
Grown men.
I know.
That's very chicken fingery.
Yeah, okay.
Okay? However, I actually probably be more put off by the scooter than the chicken fingers. The scooter might be a deal breaker.
So if you showed up to your date on a scooter, you'd go,
Like scooter and prime rib, maybe cancel out.
Yeah.
Chicken fingers and car might cancel.
Yeah, but not both.
But do you know what I'm saying?
I do.
I think the idea of chicken fingers, there's an implied immaturity. But what I'm not seeing here is interpersonal difficulty, interpersonal cruelty. If anything, it's a lack of self-awareness, but there's also a possibility that there could be a real sweetness.
yes.
And so many people leave the sweet people behind, and they spend a life, especially important years of their life, they find Mr. Prime Rib.
Right.
And then they spend their nights crying.
Right. Okay, our next one. They change the subject or disregard you whenever you try to give them constructive criticism. Deal breaker?
Okay, and again, this is why I hate that I'm not being like as chicken fingery about this, like
Yeah.
so absolute.
Right.
Like this one is more in a gray zone, and a couple reasons. How early are you in this courtship process? Constructive criticism on a first date might actually be unsettling for someone, and
True.
not even because they're narcissistic, but because they might think you're being intrusive. Quite frankly, it might feel like a boundary violation. Whereas as you build up trust with somebody, that they can hear it. Perhaps that first date, why are you ordering chicken fingers? That's not a grown-up meal. You might think that's constructive criticism. They may actually be hurt by that, right?
Right.
So I think that, and the other issue is how constructive is the criticism? One person's constructive criticism is another person's insult.
Yes.
So a lot of times we think we're giving constructive criticism, but a lot of it is tone, it's delivery, it's things in their backstory. Like, for example, they may feel awkward about something. We all have Achilles heels. We all have vulnerabilities. And so let's say somebody's struggling with their weight or something. So you might give them constructive criticism, but it hits right into that one Achilles heel. What might seem small to you is catastrophic sometimes for someone else, and it's not because that they're narcissistic. Now, this does get at the larger issue of sort of hypersensitivity. Hypersensitivity is a huge theme in narcissism. They can't hear anything that doesn't prop them up or validate them. So it could be the kind of thing where you really are, if it truly is appropriate, kindly delivered, constructive, and I don't even want to use the word criticism, I would say feedback.
Feedback.
And you were to say, you know, it's interesting, I know you feel frustrated at your boss, but you did say that like for the last 3 sales presentations, you came late. So maybe your boss is, you know, frustrated by that. You might want to try coming early. And they either attack you, that would concern me. The changing or the subject or disregarding may not be as big an issue because they may be genuinely uncomfortable about that topic. If that had said they yell at you, they scream at you, they insult you back or give you the same, so, oh really? You're never on time either. That would concern me more. This may speak to another more subtle theme. And you know what? Our conversation here, Kyle, though, highlights for me why it is so easy to fall in with a narcissist, because you can see how subtle this is.
Subtle, yes.
You see, so it really you would see now, I'd say a year into a relationship, that every time you try to give them constructive feedback, they do change the subject.
Yes.
They do shift the conversation.
Yes.
That actually starts veering into the territory of gaslighting.
Right.
You know, deflecting and,
Right.
and you know, changing the topic. But that tends to happen in more high stakes conversations. So
Right.
this one's a gray zone. I'm giving this like a 50% deal breaker.
50%. All right, next one. They say they love you on the second date.
Yeah, no. Deal breaker beyond deal breaker.
By the time they got to the
Yeah.
I would already be gone.
Yeah, no,
Like, I'm
that's-
not doing any of that nonsense.
Again, I'm going to say you are the meanest, most non-romantic shrink on the planet. It's not true.
She is the nicest lady.
I'm
you'll ever
nice. I'm not romantic, but I'm nice. And it's the surplus meaning of the words. Okay, now, I love you is a very throwaway phrase in the United States. When you talk to people from other parts of the world, Europe, India, they'll say, you say I love you a lot to each other. They say we don't really say it at all. And when we do, it's really kind of a big deal. That said, you know, I mean, think about how many relationships out there about volleying, when should I say it and all
Right,
of that. To the degree they're not saying it like, oh God, you love chocolate ice cream, I love you. It's not that, it's really the, I love you.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, that can feel very intense. Here's one thing we know about narcissistic relationships. They are relationships typically played on fast forward. Often you see people moving in very quickly, getting engaged very quickly, getting married very quickly. Part of this is if the narcissist finds a victim, a partner, call it what you will, that they want, it's like they're trying to get the butterfly under glass. You know, they try to suck them in so it gets harder to leave. Or if you're engaged, you're living in the same place, that makes a breakup harder. They can almost behave more badly and get away with it. Kind of thing is the lack of that awareness. The I love you on a second date is the kind of thing where people, well, sometimes the love bombing phase, the intensity is, there's never been a love story like this before.
Right.
I love you. And you feel like you're in your personal fairy tale.
Yeah.
And that just feels like it's on fast forward. It blinds you to the other stuff. Deal breaker.
Deal breaker. All right, next. When you watch TV together, they refuse to fast forward through the commercials.
That's not a deal breaker.
Yeah.
It feels like a waste of time.
I would go, why do you do that? Like, like the
I would say
commercials.
this is a great break to get peanuts,
Yeah.
something to drink, go to the restroom.
You know, this is
to
a great
go with
time
those
to get some chicken fingers.
Peanuts to go with the chicken fingers. Like,
Yeah.
I really do think that, no. I mean, I'd say I would ask them, why don't you want to fast forward to the commercials? And they might say, I think commercials are their own little mini art form, or I make commercials,
Right.
or, you know, this is how I watched TV when I was a child.
Yeah. That was pretty in favor of not breaking up over those things.
I think that I think the importance of this exercise is that it's not black and white. Chicken fingers notwithstanding, it's not black and white. And so even something like this, watching TV and refusing to fast forward through commercials, the act in and of itself, this issue, isn't that big a deal. It's how they respond to it. So if you say, why aren't you fast forwarding through the commercials, and they start yelling at you, insulting you, screaming at you, getting frustrated, storming out, it's their reaction to perhaps an inquiry about that that would tell you more than their refusal.
Than the actual behavior.
That's an innocuous behavior.
Right.
It's oftentimes the response to communication where we really learn about whether we're getting into a toxic pattern here.
Make sure you subscribe and give a thumbs up to this channel right here. And if you haven't yet, leave a comment below on any of the topics. Are you a chicken finger orderer? Leave a comment below. We'll be reading all of those. I'm Kyle Kittleson, and remember, whether you're ordering a prime rib or chicken fingers, you got this. Today's episode was all about avoiding getting into a relationship with a narcissist. But if you find yourself already in a relationship with a narcissist, whether that relationship is romantic or professional, or it might even be a relative of yours, I highly suggest going to medcircle.com and viewing any one of the series that Dr. Ramani has provided. There you will learn what signs to look out for, what to do if you want to stay, and if you do feel like it's time to leave, the best way to do so. It's an incredibly insightful series with lots of amazing tips and advice with Dr. Ramani, so make sure you check that out at medcircle.com.